This is the description of the detective I was given. The first thing I did was build upon the foundations laid out before me. He's a former soldier? Which war? Let's go with Vietnam. How old would that make him? Let's make his date of birth 1940, and the scene set in the 90s, making him an older detective. Why was he discharged? Perhaps he lost his legs in the war. Now, prior to building any aspect of the office, I made a bird's eye view floor plan of the perfect vision of what the space would be. Not everything came to fruition, and I'll discuss alterations and why I made them soon. Now, on to the actual spatial design. The first thing the player is met with is a long, dimly lit corridor. The only thing of notice is an ajar door with a distinctly different coloured light shining through. Having the door opening away from the player and the light peeking through in this manner was an intentional design choice. Not only would this indicate to the player that they should approach it, but this colour hue corresponds with the rest of the scene. I wanted it to be set at sunrise, so I also set the large clock to early in the morning. When the player reaches the door, it will open. I did this by creating a blueprint, in which when the player enters a box collision, the door will open according to a timeline. A very similar blueprint was also used for a chest inside the space. One thing you may have noticed is that the player walks rather slow. I actually went into the first-person character blueprint and altered the character's movement component in order to generate this effect, as the default speed felt too quick. I wanted the player to be walking slowly, as if they're cautious. Upon entering, the player is met with a ramp. I used geometry in order to create this, and applied the material on top to create a beveled effect. This is so that Harry can enter the room with his wheelchair. Now, you may have noticed there are 3 distinct desks in this space, with an additional 2 overturned in the corner. The narrative I wanted to create with this space was that Harry has been driving his colleagues away with his stance on taking cases that was wooden. Perhaps this has been damaging the firm financially as he is so focused on unprofitable cold cases, or perhaps his colleagues simply think that it's all a waste of time. Either way, all that remains are Harry and one other. The desk in the center of the room was supposed to belong to the head of the firm. This is noted by their much larger chair than the others, and their position in the center. Furthermore, you can notice that their boss name plaque is in the bin. This will create a mystery to the player, as it could connotate that perhaps this individual did not leave the firm on good terms. Their station is now a dumping ground for all the case files Harry and the other are dealing with. Another aspect regarding the previous detectives is a subtle chess-related allusion to their relationship. The boss is a king, the right-hand detective is a pawn, and the two whose desks are overturned are knights. And Harry is also a king, but how does that work? Well, I actually make Harry the black king, opposed to the white that the rest are. This could suggest some kind of power struggle between the two detectives, which could be another reason for the state of the agency now. The last allusion of any bad blood between these two is Harry's gun on his desk. This is highlighted by a lamp, ensuring the player sees it. They may notice that it is pointed directly towards the boss. Could foul play be afoot? Maybe the boss didn't leave on their own accord. Who knows? Speaking of Harry, you'll notice behind him is a cabinet with an M16, the primary gun used in the Vietnam War. I positioned this behind him to indicate that these years are now behind him, and in front of him is the mess of a law firm he's now the boss of. Also, not far off is a huge portrait of Reagan. Is Harry a Reagan supporter? Maybe. Next to his desk is a notice board, but it's quite low, right? Well, remember, he is wheelchair bound, so he needs this to be lower so he can use it. The final aspect of this room to discuss are the windows. Each differs and represents each detective they are in front of. The boss's is shut and covered by boxes, alluding to their absence. The rookie's is open and free, signifying their innocence. Harry's is literally barred off. I actually created this effect by modifying a radiator asset to save time in editing. Another aspect you'll notice is one of the client's chairs is also in the way of the window. These chairs were actually created by me on Blender by beveling and shearing shapes to create the final product. I then created the boolean for the star shape and duplicated this many times. Why? Well, if you stand at just the right angle, you'll see that the window creates a slightly scruffy looking stars and stripes. This could allude to Harry's patriotism, or perhaps the twisted version of it due to the scruffiness. So, what did I not include from my original plan? Well, the main aspect was the corridor. I dialed back on this as it wasn't within the space. The same goes for a city skyline I wanted outside the windows. Once again, it isn't actually in the detective's office space, so I chose not to do this, to save time. Overall, I've tried to frame Harry as a patriotic cripple who has pushed away all his colleagues and left his firm in ruins. Yeah, not the nicest story, but hey, hopefully the player will want to know more.